Hi, so last time I taught you about the introduction to C, and today I'm going to actually just begin examples of C and also explain the different types of functions that are available in C program, right? Here, I'm just gonna go ahead and first explain to you why a lot of these things are going to matter to you, right? So the first thing you're going to notice is that on the left hand side there are different files that are available here, and the first one is called examples.c, the second one is called intro to C, and the third one is called introduction to C.c. Now these two files, examples and introduction to C, are executable files, although you won't be able to see .exe, and the reason is that I'm running Linux right now, and to be able to run any C program, you first need to have a compiler. So gcc-version will be your compiler, and uh, not your compiler, my compiler, because I'm running the GCC compiler on the operating system called Ubuntu, and yes, so this is the case, right? You can also use different compilers like Clang or MSVC. I think that's what it's called. I might be wrong, but yes, there are multiple different compilers that are available to you in the market, and you will be able to use them, right? So I'm just gonna go ahead and jump into the uh, C file. Now the first thing you're going to notice a lot of programs here. Now don't be afraid, I'm going to be explaining this entire thing to you step by step. I just didn't want to type everything down because it's going to take consume a lot of time, and I've already done two takes of this trying to type it down, and there was always some of the other kind of issue. Either my accent was too off all over, it was either all over the place, or my breaks were all over the place. So I just wanted to make it easier for me as well as for you to be able to understand this, right? So the first thing is going to be the header file, which is going to be the hashtag include standard input output.h. I have cleared this in the last video, so but to be able to give you a brief introduction, it's just a header file which has the standard input output functions like the printf and the scanf, and that those can only be used from this header file. Then the next is called the function declaration. We're going to come back to this in just about a second, so I'm just going to write this down. Function declarations. Uh, Function declarations, right? Then I'm going to come to int main. Now I've taught you about the int main in the last video as well, but I'll give you, since we're covering the functions, I'm just going to tell you, or tell it in brief again. Main is the function that is always executed first in the entire program, and the reason this happens is because it is the main function. That's why, and I've given the value called int here. That's why I've just defaulted the statement of return 0, which means that it was a successful execution. Now, onto the function declarations: float time, float rate, and float principal, and float SIPBR. Now, I'm gonna come back to why I've named it in such a manner, but in that case, I'm just gonna do it sequentially. So here it is. Okay, so the first thing is why we have chosen float. The reason why we have chosen float is because we need floating point numbers, which means 999.99. This 0.99 values have can only come if these are floating point numbers. That's why they are floating point numbers, right? We have not used double. Now you also may have noticed that we have not used double. It's because we don't need higher precision. We don't need we just going to be limiting it to uh, two floating point numbers, which is floating point decimals. So two decimal points in other words. So dot two will be only the two values that are going to be reflected, right? If you needed higher precision, like maybe 8 decimal points, then sure, you can go ahead and do that as well. Now, another thing that I've added here is that you could use double, but it consumes more memory for what we need. Now, in the present stage, it doesn't really matter, but in just in case, I'd like to tell you that when you're going into like embedded programming and everything, these you picking these kind of variables is going to matter a lot, and that's why I need you to be a little careful with these. uh, in other cases, you can always use the auto. Let us say if you're moving on to Python or C++, then you can always use auto variables, which means there is an automatic definition of these variables, declaration of these variables. Now the next one is the float rate. The same way we've chosen a floating point rate, and the same way we've chosen a floating point principal. Then we're going to move on to the scanf. Scanf just takes in the values that are inputted into the variables, which means that ampersand just means the address, and time is the variable. So you're inputting a floating point number percentage f just means for floating point. Yeah, you just input the input number into the address of time, right? So that means you're effectively just storing that entire value into the time variable. That's what it means. Next is going to be float si, which is the raw calculation, and this will also correspond to this printf statement. Yes, this printf statement, and these both are effectively the same ways that we will be calculating this, right? Then the next one is going to be float simple interest PPV. PPV just means prospect value, and I'm just gonna come to that in just a second, right? So first let's analyze this statement. Float simple interest PBV, and which equals to is the assignments operator. So this entire thing is a function, right? This function is stored where? It's stored here, right? Float simple interest PBV, right? Now I've called this function with the variables time, rate, and principal, where we have taken the input from here, time, rate, and principal. We have inputted the exact same variables here, time, rate, and principal. So these values are passed on to the exact minor, time for t, a rate for r, and principal for p. Now if I had exchanged this and put it over here, which means in this case it wouldn't matter much for the calculations because you're effectively multiplying everything and dividing it by 100. But in other cases, if let's say I'm supposed, if I put p here, then and r here, it might even change my entire values because I'm effectively putting rate at the wrong place and principal at the wrong place, right? So that's why it matters. The way that you insert variables always matters, right? So yes. Next, now if I had not put this, effectively the value over here that will be passed on to the simple interest PPV would be 0, which means that this return type now comes into the picture, right? Key return is done. So if the return value is having a value of 100, then this entire thing is replaced by 100, which is the calculated value, and it's assigned to this particular variable called simple interest PVV, right? That's what a return statement does. It just returns that entire number to the function, which is replaced by this entire function, and it's going to be assigned over here. So if it was 1000, then this 1000 is replaced over here, then this 1000 will be assigned to the simple interest PBV. That's why it's called the passable value. It's called passable value because you're effectively creating temporary variables for the sake of just calculations, and you're just passing the value of the variable. You're not passing the addresses, right? The next one is going to be so here I've just put in the printf statement so that you can actually compare the values. I'm gonna add a next line over here, otherwise it's going to be a little ugly. Slash n, right? Now so here we are having a print SI interest PBR percentage dot to F, and here I've just done a pass by reference now. See here there's another function called float SI PBR, and here you might see that I've gotten float with a star on here, right? Referenced rate and referenced P, and then a referenced SI, and then the entire calculation as reference. Right here, you might notice that I'm not using any assignment operators because this is going to give us the exact different things. Now, I would also like to tell you that if these declarations were not there, then actually I would be running into an error. You can see here key this error is being made, and the reason is that I have not declared the entire function yet. So if I were to do this, and I'm actually going to show you the process again, and if I just run the code again and see it works, right? Now first let me explain the function, right? Control C, another thing I would like to mention, maybe it's fun for you, is that Control C is going to abort the program whenever you need it. So that's maybe one thing you might want to remember, right? So here this will be passed by reference. Now the very main thing that you might want to understand is that I'm actually passing the addresses of each, right? SIPBR and time, SIPBR and rate, and principal, and SIPBR. Another thing you might notice is that here I'm dereferencing it. Actually, no, that's not true. You're not dereferencing it. You're actually saying that there's a float with a pointer t. This is a floating, so t is a floating, is a pointer to the value, t is a float, a pointer to a floating number, right? Again, r is a value pointing to a floating number. P is a pointer variable pointing to a float data type. And in this case, si is a floating point variable pointing to a float. It's just simply called a floating point variable, a floating pointer, or a floating pointer, or it's usually called a floating pointer. That's all, right? Because it's pointing to a float variable. That's what exactly it means. It's always, these values are always going to store something called an address, which is exactly what this is, right? Ampersand is something that always stores an address, right? You're passing an address to time, you're passing an address to rate, you're passing an address to principal, you're passing an address to SIPPR. Now when you again start using it, it just basically means that once you have decided that these are for pointer integers, sorry, floating pointers, floating point numbers, floating pointers, integer pointers, yeah, floating pointers. This is always going to be an address, right? Which means that the star is going to dereference that pointer. Again, over here you're dereferencing time, you're dereferencing rate, and you're dereferencing principal to be able to get the value that you like. So star si just basically means that you're dereferencing the pointer to actually directly get the number called, where is it, SIPBR. So I've passed SIPBR, right? See here, right? SIPBR is basically, SIPBR is basically having the address of SI. So if I just say SIPBR and SI, these both are very much equal. And of SIPBR is equal to the and of SI, because we are passing the address directly, right? So we're gonna discuss this more in detail in when I'm covering the topic of pointers. But this is all you need to know. You're passing an address to this function. This address is dereferenced uh, in the function, which means that you're effectively replacing the star si with SIPBR internally, and you're basically assigning this entire value into SIPBR using a dereference pointer, and you're basically printing it in the printf statement using the same. Now I'm going to run the code, and hopefully you see the good output, right? I, yeah, I run the code, and I'm gonna go ahead and write 2.2 8.1, and I'm gonna go ahead and give you a value of 8,000. 8,000, is it enough? Yeah, I think it should be enough, right? You'll be able to see this now. SI interest from raw calculations is going to be 1425.60. Again, SI interest from the pass by value is again going to be the same, and SI interest from the pass by reference is again going to be the same, because it's effectively three different ways to actually represent the same in the same calculation three different times, so that I hope you so that you can get a clear idea of what floating by value and sorry, pass by value, pass by reference, and raw calculation is. And of course, raw calculation is something that I only use on my own, and that's why it's always going to be the same. Thank you guys. Catch you in the next one. Maybe I'll do a video on a different topic next time. I don't know when though, but I hope it's going to be soon. Thank you.